Counties that are around us that have a huge problem of having certificated staff. They have certain buildings that may not have any. And that's a problem, because now, for every one you find that might be, that doesn't have certification, that does a great job, there's probably two more that might not, okay? And so you have to be careful there. We have to ensure a candidate has a clearance certificate, and basically that means that they've had a background check within the last 5 years. So, like for me, once I do that, I get a clearance certificate that says that we have to click a button that they passed, went through a background check. And so I'm typically good unless something happens, we need to check it for 5 years. That's for all certificated staff, including parapros. And then when we renew our certificate in 5 years, when Jackson gets all that packet together, then we have to run the background checks again. And then we upload all that information to PSC, and then they give them another 5 years, and what they call an updated clearance certificate means that you're cleared to work in schools. So that's for any person that's already in that process.
We do that on our end, but whoever's renewing or the new employee has to answer a certain set of assurance questions as well. All that's recorded with the PSC, and that's part of the clearance as well.
That background check, who is it done through? Just strictly by the state?
The background check, we do one through locally through the Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
And then we do fingerprinting through Eagle Advantage, which is a middleman for does the fingerprinting that goes all through the United States. So there's two different ways. Now, all the new folks that we do go through the fingerprinting.
Sheriff's Department.
No, fingerprinting the whole United States one,
Okay.
and then the Sheriff's Department. On the renewal, you only have to do what we call the background check, and that's through the Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
That's typically the process for all Georgia educators.
All new hires have to do that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, and then check for any certification cases, investigate their resolution. You find that, remember, on the PSC website when they go through Teach Georgia. Background checks reviewed by staff administrators. So we've got 4 people that are trained to look at or provide information and check out. Deidre's one. She does the fingerprinting that goes through a computer to this Eagle Advantage, to this middle person, and they get the information from the GBI, that is this national database. And then she also gets individually, she gets the ones for the renewal and scans them out to the Sheriff's Department, and then they send back whatever they find. And she does it. Roland is a backup, and obviously Jackson and I review each one of them and check them off as they're clear. Procedures for background checks are governed by state law, and that's 35-330. And then everybody that has to touch all this has to go through GBI training, and we do that every 2 years.
Yes.
We go through an audit, and actually Valerie and Carrie had to do it because it goes through internet. They touch it, they have to follow the same guidelines that we do. So we all have to go through this training, and Deidre keeps it all in a book, and we have somebody that comes from GBI every 2 years, and they audit all of our policies. They pull like, I don't know, 10 or 12. We have to keep all this information behind lock and key, and they'll audit like 20 checks. And so you have to pull them out, and they go through and check and make sure that you've done that, everything's lined up with this certification. If they've done that, the 5-year cert, everything's where it needs to be. And then they give you ability to continue working and doing what you're doing, or they give you findings. And the last few have been real good for us. The only thing that we had to do one time was talk about, and we added it as a policy. I can't remember which one it is, but it has rules and regulations for people that have that information. So we actually added that as a policy that matches with this right here, that state code. And so all that we go through that's done, and we have a notebook that we just keep with all of our training records in there. We have to go through there, and we go through these, I don't know, how long did it take us? Probably about a half a day we go through these presentations, and we have to take these tests. And then you get a printout of whether you passed or you didn't based on you know, it's through GBI, and then we keep that information, and we have to provide that to them when they come check. These are the, if issues exist, so if something comes up and there's something on a background check, what do? Well, a lot of times, that could be confusing. You might not realize what it's in. There are lots of things that can be on there that you don't know. So if you got a finding, we always have the sheriff's department come and kind of go through it with us to explain it to us. And once they explain it to us, if there are any further questions, or if they have a question, then we may even go to the sheriff and try to get clarification. And sometimes that doesn't even work, and then we have to go to attorneys to try to find out more information about a specific case. And we try to turn that over, because a lot of times, you know, there are lots of things that are felonies, there are lots of things that are misdemeanors, there are lots of things that are very cloudy, to say the least. And so every time that we have anything that shows up, first thing we're going to do is we used to call Richard Cohenauer, now we have Ogletree. We have him come look at it. If he has a question, then we take it wherever we need to go. And so until we get clarification from the sheriff's department and or legal counsel, we're not going to check off on it. Because I don't know enough about that to know on specific cases, so we have to lean on other people that know a lot about the law and what that means. So typically with public schools, obviously anything that's a felony or is going to discontinue anything, but there are a lot of things that are misdemeanors, like there may be something way back when somebody, they had a bad check, it went through, or they had a speeding ticket that shows up. And there's some things that typically wouldn't prevent hiring, but typically anything that's going to be, that would be dangerous to kids, dangerous to adults, or dangerous to drive a vehicle, you stay away from those things. So typically, that's what that does, and we always involve anything that shows up. If there's nothing on it, it'll come back and it'll just say nothing, and then we just go on, we check it off. But if something's there, we always take it and have them come look at it and go through the nines and make sure that everything, that they're safe to be around our folks. The interview committees at the schools use pre-scripted questions. So just so when I was a principal and Alicia was a principal, we would typically have scripted questions for particular positions, like a teacher. If you had a science teacher, you wanted to guide those questions to science teachers. If you had a PE position, you guide those questions to PE teachers. But you typically use the same questions with the same candidate pool. You can't change them. That's a violation. So somebody could call you on that. So we're very particular about using the same set of questions, same rubric, same panel with everybody. Because if you don't, that's kind of a violation of, it's just not ethical. You wouldn't want to have 5 people for 2 people and then maybe 2 for the rest of them. That's not fair, because if you're filling out a rubric, how are you going to figure out how they scored? So that's why it's important to make sure everything remains the same for each candidate. And if there's a clear consensus on the best candidate, the principal will check references on the candidate to make sure there are no issues. So they're the first line. Typically on Affletrack and on Teach Georgia, they provide 3 references. Well, we're going to check those 3 references, but we have the ability to check any reference we need to. So, you know, a lot of times there's a red flag to me as a principal when a teacher's trying to come to work for me or for our kids, and they didn't include their principal or assistant principal at the last place they work. Well, that's probably going to be the first call I make, okay? And so our principals know that, try to be very diligent when they provide those application packets to us with all that information. Jackson, in that notebook right there, has all the application packets. The principals send all this information over to us that we have to look through and approve. And it has the application from Affletrack in there. It will have the information from Teach Georgia. It will have the references in there. It will have all the information that they had. Like that, we have to include the interview committee. They have to include the interview questions, the interview rubric. Now, I don't want to see how they graded it. I mean, they just, it's too much paper and stuff, but we have that on everybody that we've ever hired. So when we pull that, we know if anybody ever asks a question, we know exactly how we did it. And so that's just something that we've always done.
And yes, sometimes they do get sent back to principals or directors and said, we're missing something, you know, help us with
Yeah, if you don't have 3 references, we gotta have 3 folks that'll speak for you, you know? Because if you can't find 3 folks to speak for you, it's kind of difficult. I mean, it really is. It's just common sense. So, when we hopefully, by the time and the 3 people that sign off on it up here, that would be me, Jackson, and Alicia, and we go through there and make sure that everything's in order. And if we've got any questions, and a lot of times, we know people that are there, or we know people that know them. Try to make sure that, you know, educators are a group of folks too, and making sure that they're some of the best people that we can hire. And the principals, you know, we have really good principals in the fact that they know a lot about the education landscape, at least in Middle Georgia. There are different organizations that they can communicate, and they know who's available and who can do a good job for our kids, and a lot of times who can't. And so we lean on that because a lot of times if they know something or they've heard something from another principal, a lot of times it will help us in later problems if we know that ahead of time, if that makes sense. And those of you that run a business and you work in a business, you understand what I just said. Because you don't want to get someone else's issues and put them in front of our children. I mean, that just doesn't make common sense. So we're hoping, you know, again, we have some that don't work out, but I think generally speaking, with the performance of our children, performance of our district, our teachers and certificated staff are doing what they need to do to try to move kids forward. And that's what we're trying to do, and trying to find the best fit for each position. And sometimes that can be, you know, an experienced person. Sometimes it can be one that doesn't have a whole lot of experience, because it's a catch-22 either way you go. You hire somebody that's got a lot of experience, well, they don't have a lot of time left with you. If you hire them with no experience, you got to teach them a lot. And so trying to find that balance is always an issue for systems. And the different people that we hire and work with, our millennials are different than our mid-level people with experience, and some that have above 20 years. So, and a lot of times that experience level dictates the professional learning, it dictates the culture, it dictates the engagement. You know, when I was talking about engaging kids, it's our job to make sure we and our principals engage our staff. Because folks that don't enjoy what they do are not doing a good job. I can promise you that. So we've got to try to make it fun and enjoyable, but yet knowing it's a job you get paid for, and you got the most precious thing that a mom and daddy can make right in front of you every day. So that's why we try to take extra care in who we hire and try to put in front of you to approve each time. But, you know, if they get in here and they, you know, based on the evaluations, they don't do their job, we try to be fair and we'll try to help you. But if you're not willing to be coachable, we're going to try to move you on. And because if you're not flexible enough to try to meet the needs of every kid, you're not going to be able to work here and be successful. So that's basically what happens from the get-go. Now, the next part is once we get them on here. Once we get them on the train, then what
There's
happens?
examples of, that's
Yeah.
one example of a set of interview questions that one of our schools use.
And you can just look through that, and we typically we always say probably between 11 and 15 questions. You don't want to be too long, but you want to give enough questions that you can get information to make a decision on your
And
candidate.
it's not so rigid that one question can't lead to another.
That's right, that's right. And this is an example of a rubric that we use. That this particular rubric basically graded these different things: the criteria, communication skills, team builder, area content knowledge, classroom management, high expectations, and general attitude. A lot of our principals now, you're talking about how you gonna know about content knowledge, classroom management. They have them teach a class, or they have them teach a lesson now. Can you imagine that coming in for an interview? Well, they do. And I know all of our elementary schools do that. Well, all but one does that. And so they have to bring a lesson plan, they gotta bring their stuff, and they gotta teach it. And so I like that, because if you could do it in front of them, you could do it in front of the kids. So we've grown that, we're doing a lot better with that, and we feel good about using those rubrics. And then the superintendent, obviously, I check off on that. There's a blue sheet that Jackson puts all the names on for hires, and then we also, when we bring that blue sheet, would include retirements, resignations, leave information is all contained on that you guys approve at each meeting. And so the board approves the candidates for employment in Monroe County Schools, and then after you guys approve that, then the next day, Deidre gets that book, and then she starts sending out letters that you have been hired by Monroe County Schools and welcomes you, and then tells you what the next steps are. And the next steps are critical for what we need to do. And now we call that, we call this as a term that's kind of changed every time, we call it onboarding. So like you said, you onboard the training now. We've got to make sure that you know how to do the things you need to do to be successful. So that includes orientation, training, mentoring, and follow-up to make sure the employee is prepared to be successful in their job. And then training and follow-up actually continue into year 2 and year 3 if needed. And we get support from Middle Georgia RESA for additional coursework. If we find, like classroom management, if one's really struggling, we may have them go through and do another course through RESA to make sure that they can be, we try to give everybody every chance to be successful. But there's a limited time with that, because you can't, because every time that you have a teacher that's not up to par and you put a new class in there, they may go down a little bit. So we want our teachers way up here all the time. And so our principals, our assistant principals, instructional coaches are pushing those teachers to be the best that they can be. And that's hard to do. Those of you that have been at any job, if you're pushing folks, some are going to get a little edgy if they're not that good at it. So we're continuing to push and make sure we give them the tools they need to be successful. Feedback is obtained from new teachers each year to make sure we're meeting the needs. Y'all know how we do that? We do a survey, but we do more than that. Alicia and I go meet with them individually as groups in each school. And then we take the whiteboards and we go through all of our things like TIP, best practices training, their first few days at school, pre-planning, the first few weeks of school, and then we go through all that with them and basically create our plan for the next year based on what they've told us. So a lot of things we've morphed over the years because we've known that they needed some help in certain areas. The stuff that we're doing with guided reading and guided math came from